You guys gonna watch me fiddle around with the lighting for a minute? Hi guys, how's it going? My name's Arden, and today we're talking about what is it even called? Marvel's Warhammer 40K first book, Marnus Kazar or Magnus Calgar #1. A lot of words there, and it's just funny because it's a weird title, but this is as far as I know Marvel's first take at Warhammer in the new era of them making comics for that franchise, which I find pretty cool. Um, I am going to kind of throw a disclaimer out at the beginning. If you compare my knowledge of, say, like Marvel lore or DC lore to Warhammer 40K lore, I'm lacking. I've never played the physical game with the like models and stuff like that. That's always kind of like I remember being interested in that stuff as a kid, and my parents shut that down so hard. They were like, we'll always buy books for you, and we're willing to indulge video games, but this model business is so insane and expensive. Like it was just off the they quickly recognized my interest and just shut it down before it could even grow. So I never really got into that. That being said, I have read up and done there's a lot of peripheral Warhammer 40K stuff, and I find the universe fascinating and some of the ideas behind it really cool. For those of you that don't know, there's Warhammer, the more classic kind of, we'll say like Dungeons and Dragons esque model battling game, and Warhammer 40K, the more sci fi oriented one, but it does keep orcs and magic and demons and all of that stuff in play too. So it's kind of a magi tech universe that they've created in the year 40,000. And by then, the human race has expanded across the galaxy like 10,000 years. They've had this corpse of an emperor, I should say, ruling over them, and he's like some ancient shamanistic being that lived through all of humanity's history and like leads them to doing a better future. Although he had to sacrifice himself and a bunch of political stuff, and ended up becoming this living body, and the this empire of human worlds that spans these galaxies is thousands and thousands of worlds across, is essentially in disarray and facing all of these elements of chaos. You have other alien forces, weird cultists that the humans have just started embracing darkness. You kind of see a good glimpse of that right there. Why am I pointing wrong? This way, this way. um, oh yeah, that's a plot point in. Okay, so let's. Kirsten, thanks for joining us. He has a question. Do you think there should be a live-action Spider-Man show on the CW? I think something like that would be interesting. It'd be cool to see Spider-Man in a TV show. And I know people would object to it being on the CW, but I would just rule that out right away because CW is part of the Time Warner family and they ain't hosting a Spider-Man show anytime soon. That being said, there have been Spider-Man shows. They've just virtually all been animated. It would be cool to see a foray into live action. We'll have to see what kind of quality Disney can put together for MCU style shows. Dope Jedi, thanks for joining us. He also brought up that it takes over 1,000 human sacrifices a day for him to live. Yeah, and they're all like magically potent sacrifices too, to like feed his abilities or something like that. Like I said, I'm not an expert on Warhammer, but I'm fascinated with that aspect of it, this dark lore and this sprawling world that like universe, I should say, that these writers have created over the years, and it's got its history, all this stuff going on with it. And Marvel went ahead with Kieron Gillen writing it, and Justin Burrows and Yava Tartaglia. Ooh, you tell I really didn't try and even read that name before just now. Anyways, they did art. They really put together this story that just takes place right in the middle of that. Like even if thanks for joining us, Karsten. It was good to see you. Thanks. Even with me knowing some things about Warhammer, there were so many references I was getting. They talk about how the Emperor requires these sacrifices at one point, I believe, or I'm just remembering that. But there's a lot of cool things they bring up. And the neat thing is, this book kind of zeroes us in. So, and like, I love maps. We get an awesome map of the current Warhammer 40K universe. And I assume, I don't actually know this, but I assume in the versions over the years they developed the story because now there's this huge rift that separates the galaxy that's created all this chaos and horrible nonsense in the present day. And I think that's new, but I could be wrong. And across this galaxy, we're zeroing in on one system, and really just like a handful of worlds at best so far, called the McCraig system. And it's a relatively peaceful, well guarded realm. But to give you an idea of how messed up things are for regular humans, they mention, oh, things are good here. So the lifespan was pushing like 30 and 40, the average human lifespan. And that represented like the best possible scenario for human existence in this universe. Like, this is a bleak and dark world. When Dope Jedi was mentioning like all these sacrifices. He also asked, when did this comic come out? It is a few came out. It is a few weeks old at this point. I'm a little just behind on this, although it has a or a copyright date of December 2020, so it really has only been a couple of weeks. I don't know the exact date I got it on, but it's a relatively, well, older book is a weird thing to say for something that's 2 weeks old, but in the world of comics, it goes and goes and goes. I'm not even sure. I assume that we're right around the corner from the next issue coming out, for example, to give you an idea of, we're getting there. And the McCraig system is a bit of a breadbasket. It produces food for like all these worlds, and they're specifically zeroing in on a world that largely feeds the rest of the system and beyond. It's actually a world where our main character, a space marine named Marneus Calgar, grew up. Now, the Space Marines are another, and this is what I love about Warhammer 40K, is there's so many elements and layers to this stuff. So my assumption is, I know for a fact this Marneus Calgar series is like a short mini series. It's going to go for like 4 or 5 issues. My hope is that we'll also focus on other factions in the world of Warhammer. Maybe look at some orcs. But I love the story about the Tau Empire. I want to see stuff on the dark side of the rift, the great rift that separates the galaxy, and they don't really know what's going on the other side, is the impression I get. And the cool thing about Warhammer 40K in general is they've built all these things up where there's all these cool ideas and a really detailed, interesting map, but it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, for those of you who know, where they kind of set you up with this framework of a story, and then people setting up games and building stuff really can just build anything out of it, which is the perfect conditions for Marvel to just be like, all right, we're going to make a story. In this case, this one's about Space Marines, but maybe we can focus on like the elements of chaos in another miniseries, or like I said, the orcs and all that stuff, which I think would be cool as hell. There's all of these layers to Warhammer and all these things you can do. Even the Space Marines, we could just flip to the other side of the galaxy and tell a completely different story. Now, as I was saying, the Space Marines are particularly cool too because they're these genetically engineered beings that use this like ancient technology, and they tower over other people. This comic does that so well. He's talking to a regular human at one point, and the dude barely reaches his knee standing up. like they're both just standing on their feet, and these Space Marines are like otherworldly beings. Marneus Calgar grew up on the planet that the story takes place in, but that was hundreds of years ago because they live so long compared to like these ordinary humans. But you look at them just like being this one source of protection against all of these things that are killing humans and just slapdashing the life expectancy to like at best half of what it is today. You can see why they're worshipped as gods, and the emperor is like their god king among the human race and stuff. I think this book does an excellent job of that. And Kieron Gillen, I have no idea what this dude's experience with Warhammer is, but as far as I can tell, he did his homework. Now, like I said, I have a limited thing. Maybe a diehard Warhammer fan will notice little faults, but I would expect them to pick up on more references than I did, which would be pretty cool. Adrian says, do they have to move my miniatures 3 inches and roll its ability in the comic? No, they don't do anything like that. But I think it gets into the scale and the size that Warhammer 40K always kind of talked about, But those miniature battles, I always felt never really lived up to. You'd have like these little things, but like we're talking about planets just of people slaughtering each other and stuff like that. And this book sells that. Um, and I almost want to leave it right there. We could go over the whole plot, but and I will go over a little bit, but I think I'm going to go pretty light over this next bit. Normally we kind of go over it with a bit more of a fine-tooth comb, but I really think you guys should check it out. Because here's the thing. If you're a fan of Warhammer, I think, you'll enjoy this book. Like, there's so many cool things about it. It opens with, like, here, we'll do this for you guys. The bolt thrusts itself from the muzzle with a smaller charge, as if it were but a lesser weapon. When in the air, it shows its caliber. Its own propulsion bursts to life. It accelerates. Its diamantian tip would punch through ceramic plate. Ceramite plate. The machine's spirit pauses, giving a moment to burrow inside. It detonates. A heretic dies. And that's like the grim, marching tone of this book. It's really kind of cool. That's what I like about Warhammer. And the impression I always got of just this darkness, this never-ending war, no hope for humanity to ever call this place. Like even in the intro page. For more than 10,000 years, the living corpse of the Emperor sat immobile on the golden throne. The Empyrean of man is beset from every side. 1,000,000 space marines, the Emperor's angels of death, defend these million worlds. There is no hope, no peace, no love. In this grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And heroes like Marneus Calgar fight it. That is like the tone of Warhammer, and this book gets it so well. And the rest of the story is just about Marneus kind of like thinking about his time growing up on this planet. We flash back and get a sense of the insane training of the Space Marines and what they go through. It reminds me a lot actually of Gunslinger, the franchise of books by Stephen King. I just read the first novel and I really liked it, but it goes through kind of the process of how people become a gunslinger. It's the same kind of thing, just this brutal, unending slog. And the books are a relevant comparison because it's the same kind of darkness and that sort of thing. And most of the book is kind of about that flashback and learning how this kid kind of became a Space Marine. There's a lot of interesting dynamics to it. He was born from a noble family, and they paid for his training, but he used his inheritance to pay for all his friends to get the same training so they'd all stand a chance to become a Space Marine. And I am very curious to see how that all plays out, because I don't know if any of his friends are still alive. I don't think they are, judging by the way things go in Warhammer. And meanwhile, there's something really creepy and dark going on on one of the moons of this breadbasket world. And these two acolytes that are like these cyborg beings that connect into like this hub of information and sort of serve as advisors to the Space Marines and stuff like that, are presumably killed by, they look like agents of chaos of some kind, so something demony. Yeah, solid recommend on my part. An excellent book and totally worth your time. Dope Jedi is saying I'll definitely buy it. Longtime fan of yours, by the way. Oh, and that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, like so Dope Jedi clearly has heard of Warhammer and knows probably more than I do about it. You'll love it, I think. And I was gonna say, if you don't know anything about Warhammer 40K, I think that's a solid introduction. There's stuff you're not gonna get, but there's so much well explained there. They give you a map, they introduce you to all these things, and you really get a sense of what the Space Marines are, which is just like, a little tiny chunk of the Warhammer universe, but that's perfect as an intro. And I am so curious to see what Marvel does with the rest of the franchise. It's also just cool that they're doing this. Marvel, it's interesting. While DC is suffering layoffs because of larger issues within Time Warner, Marvel is expanding. They already had Star Wars, and they're constantly seem to be looking for trying out new things like that. And it's a good idea. It's really cool too. Cipriano Lopez says Warhammer 40K is the exact opposite of the woke culture. What does that have to do with political correctness? I don't think it's relevant, to be honest. Like, it's the same thing with Star Trek or a lot of sci-fi. Like, race doesn't seem to matter to people once aliens are involved, because why would it? And when you talk about like woke culture, if you're talking about it being neutered, you don't understand their point, my friend. Like they're not afraid of neutering. Like it's never been about violence. Anyone who doesn't buy this going in for violence is, yeah, I don't know. I think that was a missed take. Um, oh, I see. Soprano was saying, "Great Marvel can ruin a great franchise now." Yeah, okay. Well, whatever. That's your opinion. It's an opinion you share with other people, but they nailed this, so you're wrong. Like you're just plain wrong. Um, Adrian is saying there maybe hope for the Alien series. There's going to be an Aliens versus Marvel covers. Oh, I forgot about that. You know what? I wasn't really looking for. That was the other franchise I was talking about with Marvel, like picking up things like that. They got that as part of the Fox deal. I do have to say, this book actually really has me. Oh, okay. Marvel's well aware that when you take a franchise like Warhammer or Alien being another good one, uh, like you can't hold back on gore and bloodshed and violence, and Warhammer 40K has all of that, and it's great. Or like this book, I should say, Warhammer 40K is all about that. So it'd be insane for them not to publish a book along those lines, which has me pretty optimistic for Marvel, like potentially doing good with Alien, and they're talking about like potentially crossing over with Marvel. We'll see. Adrian's also saying, speaking of the Tower series, Marvel did a comic book series. Yeah, they've done a bunch of Dark Tower books over the years. From what I understand, I know nothing about them. I understand some of them are them reworking things and that sort of thing, but I don't believe they're gonna do a full crossover. Oh wait, no, what did I say? Oh, the Dark Tower. I don't believe it's like anything substantially extra on top of the existing Gunslinger series, from what I understand. That's what I meant to say. That I was reading the next comment, I got thrown off because someone's talking about like Marvel doing crossovers with Alien, like they're doing covers of that. Covers are fine. I don't know how much I'd want to see a full exploration of that. Marvel already has the Brood, so they don't need to really necessarily do crossovers. Star Wars and Alien? I don't know. The right writer could nail something like that in a really interesting way. And it also might mean, like, what's up with Predator? I don't know the rights to that or what the story is there. Thanks for joining us, EasyD415. And Dope Jedi was saying, does that mean Disney owns Game Workshop? I don't, unless there's some deal I haven't heard of, I really don't believe so. Right on the cover, it says this is a Warhammer official licensed product. And I bet if I quickly look through the legalese, there's also a lot of advertisements for Warhammer stuff throughout this book. Yep. They have different copyright information for Marvel and Games Workshop. So they are still distinct entities at this moment. It's happened a ton of times in comics before. That's usually the model. But it's perfectly reasonable to ask that question. I don't think Disney would feel the need to buy a company to get into the games market, though. They already have a huge foothold in it at this point. So they're doing fine. um, Adrian was saying there was a lot of great superhero versus alien versus predator stories with DC heroes. Yeah, and I'd be curious if Marvel can maintain that sort of quality Dark Horse put out with the Alien franchise in particular. I feel bad for Dark Horse that they're losing all this stuff, but they seem to have found other avenues to publish things and other interesting stuff to do, so I'm not terribly worried for them. And yeah, I think we'll leave it there because I've gone on like 10 minutes longer than when I was like, all right, I was feeling pretty good about the review, but it's always good to chat with you guys a bit. Plenty more comics to review, so don't worry about that. And thanks for joining me. And we'll see you.